Japan and France this weekend, folks. July Internationals. This is one of many. Believe it or not, Japan and France have only played 4 times in their rugby history, dating back to 1973. And then they had a 30-year gap until they played again in 2003 at the World Cup, 2011 at the World Cup, and then in 2017. But amongst those 4 games, the most recent game was a draw. So, yeah, we'll go through the squads, some stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how this game may or may not pan out. I should say, if you want any rugby gear, go to Lovell Rugby. I've ordered more jerseys from Lovell Rugby than I think any other jersey manufacturer. They're now a affiliate of the channel, jersey store anyway, rather than manufacturer. They've got a huge selection, and they ship stuff by DHL. So, yeah, pretty quick service for rugby jerseys. Check them out. Honestly, one of my favorites. But, yeah, the Japanese lineup. I haven't watched any of the Japanese League One this year, unfortunately. So, I'm not kind of sure what form these guys are in. They have played 2 games against Uruguay. And some good performances. They scored a fair few tries. I'm still kind of catching up on those games. Done the stats on them. They seem to be pretty dominant. But maybe a little bit of an indication in a slight change of tactics from Jamie Joseph's guys. The frontline lineup I'm relatively familiar with, and if you've seen Japan play, you should be as well. Inagaki, Sakate, and Valu are the front rowers. So Inagaki is still probably my favorite Japanese player, and he's a prop. That kind of shows you how good he is. Sakate is captain as well. There was potential for the veteran Horie to play in this one, but I believe he's got COVID, so unavailable for this one. And Ivalu's been a bit of a stalwart as well, but sometimes kind of coming from the bench, not always getting a start, but he is getting a start in this one. Van der Veld and Cornelsen is also a relatively familiar front row, adding a bit of extra height. And then Leitch, Gunter, and Tatafu are the back row. Now, Leitch, everyone's probably pretty familiar with Michael Leitch because he's been playing with the Japanese for as long as he has. And, you know, he's the former captain. But Tatafu is an absolute ball-carrying, block-busting unit. Like, whatever words you want to say about him to imply that he breaks tackles, that's him. Whether he's going to go 80 minutes in the very hot conditions in Toyota, I'm not sure. Jamie Joseph has talked about the fact that the heat is going to be a factor. There's been really hot conditions. He's expecting the French to slow the game down. Because, yeah, apparently it's very, very hot. So that will be a factor. Like, the weather's not always a factor in rugby, but it could potentially. We usually talk about rain being the main factor, but no, it could be the heat in this one. So that's your forward pack. Shigeno and Yamasawa are the 9-10 combo. I don't know how many caps Yamasawa has for the Brave Blossoms. I'm more used to seeing Tamura. He is, like, pretty much their go-to guy. I did see him play in one of the games against Uruguay, but I'm not sure if he picked up an injury. He's not on the COVID list, like Saito, the halfback. He's one of the guys with COVID. And the fullback, Noguchi, is also out with COVID. But I didn't see Tamura's name on the list, whether he got injured or not. Somebody do let me know. But Yamasawa, like 27 years old, he's played for the Brave Blossoms a few times. So we will see how he goes in the number 10 jersey. Certainly a big task up against the French. Nakano and Riley is 12 for 13. Likewise, I'm missing the name of Asaeli. It's not always that easy for me trying to get information on some of the players because there's not that much English reporting on a game when there's no English-speaking team involved. But I'm assuming Asaeli is injured if he is not playing, or maybe Jamie Joseph's just building some depth. But, yeah, that's your 12-13 combo. Van den Heever is on the right wing. Fifita is on the left wing. He's another guy who's maybe still relatively early in his Brave Blossoms career. Been defensively a little bit vulnerable from the games I've seen him, which is a very limited sample size, but attacking very much a weapon. And then Yamanaka is pretty steady at the back. Japan are the 10th team in the world up against the 2nd. So hopefully they put in a good showing at home. The bench is a bunch of guys who I have not really seen play. I think I saw Lee play the other day against Uruguay. He took over the 10 jersey for a wee while. Hashimoto is the backup hooker. Morikawa is there. Derns is there. But yeah, likewise, I say that the bench it's a bit of a struggle for me. Maybe I need to go back and watch those 2 Uruguay games to catch up. For the French side, it is likewise a A less than fully familiar French team because, they've said about this mission during the July games to build a bit of depth under Gaultier, and that continues. They are without a few guys. Aldegheri picked up an injury, so he's going to miss the tour. Sean Edwards, Matt Spring, Americ Luke. These guys all tested positive for COVID. Labette as well. So, a bunch of guys didn't actually make the flight because of COVID. So from what is left of the squad, it was a pretty big squad for only 2 games. We've got Gross, Malvaka, and Bamba in the front row. Now that's a legit all-international front row. There's no debutants there. So scrum time, I would expect the French guys to try and turn the screws. But like I said, I really rate Inagaki, and Valu's no spring chicken. He's no, green around the gills rookie. So they could be relatively competitive. I still think they want to get the ball out quickly, but anyway, Flamont is starting at 4, so he's not in the loose forwards this time, and then Jolmes is there at 5. He is a debutant, but he's a very tall individual. I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting a bit of line-out time. Olivon is there as captain in the loose. He is just genuinely one of the best loose forwards in the world when he's fit, and he is finally fit, so pleased to see him back. He needs some game time. Cheton, the tackling machine, and then Tonga at number 8's on his debut, but if you saw him play for the Barbars the other day, you know he's another big ball carrier as well. So him up against the Tatafu is going to be worth the price of admission, I would say. Luku, interestingly, got the nod at 9. I was kind of hoping one of the youngsters, like Kuyu or maybe the other guy, would get a crack. But Luku, the kind of steady as she goes, very reliable, experienced number 9, gets the nod. So I suppose that makes sense with him alongside Jalibert. Those guys get to run the show in the absence of kind of like Dupont and Intermark. Moefana and Vakatawa, that's an all-international midfield. Could cause trouble, especially with Vakatawa's big ball carriers, but Moefana is also pretty good. The odd offload. Lebel has got some good footwork. Penot is one of your more experienced guys on the right wing. And then Jaminet, goal kicking, relatively big boot at fullback. Lots to like about the back 3, I think. So, it's despite the fact there's a couple of debutants in the starting 15, it's still a very, I think, strong-looking French side. The bench, Bugari, Priso, Falatea, Lavaux, Tolofua, Makalu, Kuyu, and Astoy. So only the 2 backs on the bench. They may be trying to dominate up front, but remember, in the heat, it maybe makes sense to have an extra forward. So if these guys are getting exhausted, if the Japanese are trying to run the French guys off their feet, then you may want that extra forward just to get a bit of extra zip into the game. Across the last 4 games, as I mentioned, it's 3 wins and a draw to the French. You can look at the average score, but you're going back to 1973, so the average is 38-23. For what's that's worth, but 23-23 was the game in 2017, but not very familiar sides. There's a handful of guys from the Japanese team who are still there, but for the French team, I think it's only 2. I think it's Penot and Makalu. Those are the only guys. Like Dupont was on the bench for that one, but of this squad, from that squad, there's not a lot that's the same. Statistically, it's been interesting with Japan up against Uruguay because we have seen them putting a lot more kicks in compared to what we saw last year. Like last year, Japan were only kicking 19 times a game. They were kicking 30 times a game against Uruguay. So a big increase, playing a bit more territory. But equally, they were able to beat a lot more defenders. I mean, it kind of would make sense that the Uruguay defense is maybe not up to the same standards as some of Japan's opponents last year. So Japan were kind of able to back themselves to beat defenders rather than necessarily go around them. If you looked at 2021's numbers, Japan, they just pass the ball an incredible amount. They like to run teams off their feet. They want to use that mobility and fitness, which is maybe what they revert to against the French, because as I mentioned, the French pack's got some pretty big units in it, and the weather's supposed to be pretty hot. The French also like to kick the ball. They also kick the ball like 30 times on average in the Six Nations. So if it becomes a bit of a kicking duel with Jaminet there at the back, it could get troublesome for the Japanese, I reckon. I reckon they might get more value out of their high-tempo passing game, but we will see. The French defence is also very, very stingy. They don't miss many tackles. They don't concede many clean breaks. But as I mentioned, the stats from that French team I'm looking at, the Six Nations, is very different from the Six Nations team, or from the French team, which is out on the field against Japan this Saturday. But yeah, it is on in Toyota. The weather forecast, as I said, is looking pretty hot. Predictions-wise, the bookies have got France by 15 points, and the rugby forecast algorithm's got France by 18 points. So France are big-time favourites despite the largely changed lineup. And as I mentioned, the Japanese lineup is not all the kind of familiar names. Certainly a few names have been brought through, and Jamie Joseph did rotate his squad a wee bit for the 2 Uruguay games as well. So yeah, we will kind of have to wait and see how this one pans out. You guys let me know your thoughts. If you think you know the predictions, you got a couple of days left to sign up for Super Brew. Not even that, like less than 48 hours. If you want to get in on Super Brew, do the predictions, join in the game. It's always a bit of fun. You guys let me know your thoughts, folks. And yes, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.